mix in like my computer audio. So.
Chloe.
No, we're doing video. Yes.
Yeah, we're all good. Yeah.
We're doing video.
From Kenya to Colombia, from Iraq to Korea, in slums, in schools, in prisons, and in theaters, every day people gather at TEDx events around the world to hear the best ideas bubbling up in their communities. Today, you are part of a global conversation about our shared future. So what is this TEDx? TEDx is an initiative of the TED Conference, a non-profit devoted to ideas worth spreading. We grant free licenses to allow TED-like events to spread globally. This event today is based on the TED Conference format and ideals, but is independently organized by your local community. So please make sure to thank the team of volunteers who worked so hard on today's event. It's their ideas, dedication, and time that made it all possible. It's they who booked all the speakers, and the views you'll hear today are, of course, those of those speakers, not necessarily of TEDs. But we hope their talks spark an exciting conversation among you. This is a day for curiosity and for skepticism, for openness and for critical thinking, for inspiration and for action. The more you enter into it, the more you'll take out. And now, on with the show.
Hi, everyone. Good morning, and welcome to TEDxGeorgiaTech 2018. My name is Chloe, and I currently serve as the executive director of this year's completely student-based organizing team. On top of a full course load of Georgia Tech classes, each of the students on our team has volunteered their time to prepare, finance, market, coordinate, and expand our organization. Yeah. And today, all of that hard work comes together. So round of applause for our volunteer team.
Yeah.
As a team, we are so excited to have each of you here today to experience the day that we have planned. A quick thank you to our sponsors: Parents Fund, Georgia Tech Campus Services, Georgia Tech Student Government Association, Waffle House, shout out breakfast, Tips Treats, and Insomnia Cookies, which are coming. Before we officially begin, I have a few housekeeping details that I want to remind you guys of. We do ask that you refrain from using any technology while our speakers are on stage. Should you have to use your phone or laptop for an emergency, you feel free to leave the theater to do so, or wait until one of our breaks. But we do ask that you refrain from that while they're on stage. The exit doors are the same doors that you came in from. Unless it's an emergency, we are going to leave those doors closed during each talk. Restrooms are located in the same rotunda area where you checked in. If you post anything on social media today, we ask that you use our hashtag TEDxGeorgiaTech2018. We're on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, and we'd love to see your perspective of the day. Last note, we have some really, really exciting things planned for the day. We have some exclusive swag that we're handing out at the end of the day. We have an awesome speaker lineup, so I just encourage you all to stay for the entire conference. Whether you're tempted to leave during lunch or not, please stay for the entire time. We have awesome things planned. Now I'm going to hand it off to our incredibly charismatic MC for the day, Alex Weber. Alex is a world record holder and the digital host of American Ninja Warrior. He's traveled very far to be at our event today, and we are so excited to have him here. So with that, thank you for being here, and I'll pass it off to Alex. Woo!
Thank you. You're awesome. Thanks, Chloe. Yeah. How we doing, everybody? We feeling good? Give it up for Chloe and everyone here at Georgia Tech. This is awesome. Give it up for yourselves, guys. This is Saturday morning. We made it. You know, let's get a little energy. Guys, so TEDx Georgia Tech. This is a very cool event. My resting excitement level is about a 9. I'm through the roof here today. Because what is this? Why are we here right now? Besides Waffle House, which is reason enough. Why do we come here today, Saturday, rather than Netflix marathon, which is the best? I think we're here, everyone here, Because we're open. We're open to a new idea, or maybe to rethink something, or challenge something, or cultivate something, or enhance something. I think we're here to grow. Now, why today is really cool is because we've all decided that we don't want to grow alone. We don't want to grow like some houseplant sitting on a windowsill just in solitude with the sun. No, we want to grow together. We want to grow. We're like a jungle here today of different types and kinds and sizes. We've got strong strength and trees, and Miss, you've got a beautiful strength to you. And we've got our vibrant flowers just bursting with life. Sir, you're radiant right there in the second row. You're absolutely bursting. And that's a beautiful thing. We're not closed off or scared of different people and different ideas. We're open and embracing them to further our growth. That's pretty cool. That's a pretty cool community that we have here today. I really like communities. I've been a part of different ones. Let's see, we're at Georgia Tech. In college, I was a member of a fraternity, which if you couldn't tell, you could. I look like I'm still pledging a frat, you know what I mean? Like I might swing by Delta Gamma after this wraps up. I look like Stifler's little brother got lost shopping at H&M, I think. I think that's where I'm at. In college, I also played college sports. A little about me, I played Division I lacrosse in the Ivy League, which is highly regarded as one of the douchiest things you can do. I don't know if douchey is TEDx-sanctioned language, but it's apt. But college, I always have mixed emotions when I think about my college experience because I also really loved theater when I was there. And college for me wasn't a period where I didn't know who I was. It was a period where I didn't allow who I was. Anyone ever hide part of themselves from different things? Maybe you have a crush. You? Yes, thank you, Will. Maybe you hide part of yourself from a friend or your crush or someone you want to work with because we're scared that we won't be accepted, that we won't be liked. Is there anything worse? It's 2018. I don't know if there is. College was, I did a lot of hiding. I would go to play in the sports game and go to the frat, and I would hide the part of me that liked the theater. I would hide it because I was scared that they wouldn't like me. And then I'd wake up the next day, and I'd literally sneak off to rehearsal with the theater kids, and I'd hide the part of me that was kind of jockey, which clearly they saw right through. But the ironic part about it is I was hiding all this stuff to not be an outsider. But hiding is what made me an outsider because I was inherently being dishonest with all these groups. I was lying to them, I was lying to the frat, I was lying to the theater kids. Hiding a truth is the same thing as lying. That is a quote that I read on the internet. I have no idea who said it. I assume The Rock. I don't know. Maybe Beyonce. I don't know. Probably one of them. But trying to not be an outsider made me an outsider until finally it got too exhausting and painful to keep lying to all these people and myself that I finally was just like, this is who I am. I'm an artsy frat jock. And it was freeing. It was liberating. It felt like I was taking off these heavy clothes, like I was a little kid just running through a sprinkler and just taking, like, I don't need this pesky bathing trouser, just running free and naked through a sprinkler. This is me, world, you know? And it felt great. And listen, I can't go near sprinklers anymore, but like, that's a byproduct. And not everyone accepted me in those groups, and that's okay. A tough reality, but that's okay. Because the people who stuck around, man, those are good people, and they want the full you. So all that is to say, whatever's brought you here today to TEDx, Georgia Tech, bring that full you. Bring that full you. Don't hide anything, because the full you is something special. And when we bring that and then we add in our brilliant speakers who are going to make us rethink things and challenge and question and explore and cultivate, we're going to grow in a very special way. Why today, I think, is a very cool, special, and rare thing is that everyone who's here today is here because we want to live a little better and maybe touch lives that we come across in a little better way. How damn cool of a reason is that to do anything or be anywhere? And that's not happening. People are not just coming together for that just anywhere. It's here in this room. So today, we're all a part of something very special. Thank you so much for being here at TEDx Georgia Tech. Give yourselves a round of applause. And the great part about it is, in addition to all that, we get Waffle House and Insomnia cookies. So, like, it's a win-win-win. Today's going to be a great day. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for spending your time with us. I'm going to bring up your first speaker. This guy is incredibly talented. He is a student at Georgia Tech. He's going to be graduating with a business degree. Get loud. Let's make some noise. Let's give a very warm welcome for Will Courage Clare.
Morning. As a quick show of hands, who here gets annoyed when someone brings up the terms sustainability, environmentalism, or global warming? It's okay, you can be honest here. As a Floridian, people will sometimes ask me, or more often than not tell me, half of your state's going to be underwater by 2100 or something like that. And I can't even begin to imagine or let alone visualize what that could look like. So I did some research. And according to Climate Central and National Geographic, this is what South Florida looks like in 2170, where the sea levels have risen by a total of 5 feet because of unchecked pollution. Furthermore, this is what the city of Miami Beach looks like. And you'll be pleased to know that if you're still trying to get your morning run on South Beach, it's going to happen. But Miami Beach is nothing more than that. It's just a beach. No Collins Avenue, no Lincoln Road, and certainly no Flamingo Park. So as you can imagine, when somebody brings up sustainability, environmentalism, or global warming, you bet I'm annoyed. I'm damn annoyed. And I'm not just annoyed because of the horrifying prospect of what could happen to my homeland, but like some in my generation, I'm caught between some differing sentiments. The first is, well, damn. This is such a massive problem, this global warming climate change thing, and I should devote every one of my last resources and change everything that I'm doing to devote my efforts to solving this problem. But then I also think to myself, well, damn, 2170. I don't know about y'all, but I'm planning to be dead by then. My children, I think they're planning to be dead by then too. This whole underwater scenario just doesn't seem very realistic to the human mind, so why should I care? So today, ladies and gentlemen, I hope to show to you why you should care about this issue and why you should think more sustainably. One of the first times I came to the Scheller College of Business was in the spring of 2014 for a scholarship interview. And one of my interviewers was a gentleman by the name of Howard Cannell. Now, Howard has been a global sustainability leader at the Kimberly-Clark Corporation. He's on the board of multiple nonprofit sustainability initiatives here in Atlanta. And at the time, he was the managing director of the Ray C. Anderson Center for Sustainable Business at Georgia Tech. I really liked what he did and what he had to say in that interview. So I caught up with him a couple years later. And he said to me, Will, It is better to try to change 1% of Walmart than it is to open up 100 Ben & Jerry's when it comes to achieving your environmental sustainability goals. It is better to try to change 1% of Walmart than it is to open up 100 Ben & Jerry's. And what Howard meant by this is that a company like Walmart, which is the Fortune 1 company, it's the biggest company, has such a huge general impact that even making a small change to that can have more consequence on the world than opening up 100 smaller initiatives or businesses like Ben & Jerry's, even if part of their corporate mission is social responsibility and putting forth progressive ideas. So, being the skeptic Georgia Tech student that I am, I decided to put Howard's advice to the test. And I did so by participating in the 2017 Summer Co-op and Internship Carbon Reduction Challenge. We'll just call it the challenge for the purposes of this presentation. I think y'all will like that better. And I not only found Howard's advice to be valid, but also critically important. So I implore to you today, seek to change 1% of Walmart to achieve your sustainability goals. Now, before we look at why you should seek to change 1% of Walmart, let's look at why sustainability is good for business. Because many folks, to no fault of their own, and I genuinely mean to no fault of their own, may not see the connection between sustainability and profit. Here's just a small tidbit of evidence for you. According to the Scheller College of Business's strategic plan, and I quote, "Sustainability is one of 4 global business megatrends related to the continued success of business education and research." What that means, ladies and gentlemen, is that every worker, every student, every professor, every manager, every CEO, every small business owner who wants to be successful in business on this planet, this century, needs to keep these 4 things behind me at the front of their minds. And if there's anything that I've learned in my sustainability journey, it's that sustainability at its root is a systems issue, which means that it has a knack for affecting everyone and everything at any time. This could be as simple as getting a paper straw when you go to Ted's Montana Grill instead of getting a plastic straw pretty much anywhere else. Or it could be as complicated as a recent idea to generate solar power in Nevada, use high-speed direct current lines to transmit that energy cross-country, and then flipping on your light switch here in Atlanta. Sustainability is a systems issue, and it is critical to the future success of business. So for the Carbon Reduction Challenge, I worked on a team at SunTrust Bank with 5 other interns from Georgia Tech. And if you're not familiar with SunTrust, ladies and gentlemen, for those of you who may be watching outside of the region, SunTrust is the 9th largest consumer bank in the United States, with brick-and-mortar operations in 11 states, fueled by the passion and dedication of their almost 25,000 teammates. And our goal at SunTrust was to research, propose, design, and implement a sustainability project that would reduce SunTrust's carbon footprint. Our sponsor at SunTrust, Amy Ross, proposed to us a multitude of projects that we could tackle. Some which were more standalone, some which were more interconnected and intricate. These were things such as starting a walk, bike, and take the train to work challenge, increasing LED lights on SunTrust properties, increasing the use of recycling on SunTrust properties, and reducing domestic staff air travel. Wanting to test this 1% of Walmart theory, we said, what's the biggest standalone carbon emitter here? And how can we make a narrow but impactful project in the realm of sustainability? So we went with domestic staff air travel. And while we could have made a very broad impact where we reminded SunTrust teammates of green things, green policy, and green ways of being in everything that they do and everywhere that they are from 8 to 5, as my best friend says, if anything, the carbon reduction challenge is an exercise in what to do when you have no experience, when you have no clout, and when you have no time. We were undergraduate interns with no previous corporate sustainability experience, and we had 8 weeks to do all of this. So we ran some calculations, and we said, okay, 1% of Walmart, right? So let's do this with flight reduction. What happens if we reduce SunTrust domestic staff travel by, let's say, 1 to 2% year over year for 5 years? Big impact was the result. 1.1 million pounds of carbon dioxide that wouldn't go into the atmosphere over 5 years. And then we said, a company as good and reputable as SunTrust, when they send their teammates for meetings and activities, probably doesn't make them stay in the airport and then do those activities in the baggage claim area. They probably rent a car to go to their meetings and activities. We looked at SunTrust's rental car policy, which read that the default option was an intermediate level car. We asked, what happens if we switch that to economy class? Big impact. 500,000 pounds of CO2 that wouldn't go into the atmosphere over the next 5 years. And then we circled back to flights and said, is there anything else to get out of this? And while we were looking for ideas, one of my colleagues proposed, is there such a crazy thing as an airline that emits less carbon dioxide? And if so, what happens if we took a small percent, let's say 5% of flights, from the current airline over to that more fuel-efficient airline over the same 5-year time frame? Turns out that does exist. And the result, big impact once again. 250,000 pounds of CO2 that wouldn't go into the atmosphere. So what does that leave us in the aggregate? In the aggregate, we could save SunTrust from emitting 1.85 million pounds of carbon dioxide and generate $2.1 million in total savings over 5 years. Now, if you're not a climate expert, you might have a little bit of trouble understanding what 1.85 million pounds of CO2 looks like. So for those of you in the room, 1.85 million pounds of CO2, generating that is the energy equivalent of watching the Ed Sheeran cameo on Game of Thrones on a 42-inch liquid crystal display television for 535 years non-stop. Who the hell wants to kill the planet for that? Seriously, though. Seriously. What does a project like what we did look like 10 years from now? What about 15 years from now? What does a small change like this eventually lead to? I'm pleased to announce that after meeting with C-suite executives at SunTrust, our rental car modifications were approved the next day. Yes, they were approved the next day. And our flight recommendations are currently under review with intent to implement. Now, you may be thinking, undergraduate interns with no experience, no clout, and no time go to big American bank and make significant carbon impact that gets approved immediately. Sounds a bit too good to be true, and I'm right there with you if you're thinking that. However, our team has stumbled across what we think is a more realistic two-part theory as to why our recommendations were considered and approved. One, our recommendations were palatable. We proposed to modify just a small percent of SunTrust domestic staff air travel, 2% year over year for 5 years. And what this means is that we could make a significant carbon savings impact without really affecting or upsetting SunTrust's current travel environment. And secondly, we made our recommendations easy to implement, understand, and own, which means that people can take responsibility for them all the way down to the individual level. Let me give you an example. A teammate who travels for work at SunTrust may see the value in using a Skype video headset to avoid going to just 1 to 2 meetings per year. That is all that it takes to meet that first year 2% reduction target. And furthermore, for that teammate who must absolutely travel to that meeting or activity, he may see the value, or she may see the value, in renting something like a Ford Fiesta instead of a Ford Focus to benefit both the planet and the company's bottom line. It's not difficult to be part of solutions like these. And I genuinely and truly believe that if companies wish to be successful in their environmental and sustainability goals, they need to equip their employees with the education and tools necessary to make independent and autonomous decisions for the benefit of the company's carbon footprint. Let me be blunt with you for a second, because it wouldn't be responsible, it wouldn't be sustainable if we soften reality. Climate change, global warming, whatever it is that you want to call it, is the single biggest challenge that humanity as a species has ever faced. And it's not just one single issue, folks. It is a plethora of complicated, stressful, and extremely time-sensitive issues. And being sustainable calls for us to re-examine, reevaluate, and reimagine every single institution that we have created as a species up to this day. Sustainability is really hard. And it's not just hard. It's revolutionary. However, sustainability is viewed according to how you want to paint the picture. Radical and revolutionary, or something maybe a bit more incremental. For SunTrust, we provided padding on top of their current sustainability platform that allows them to be more operationally efficient, allows them to compete better with peer institutions, and furthermore allows them to increase their technological prowess. This is an incremental change. And the fact that it is an incremental change means that it's easier to understand, implement, and own near term. It is a short-term win. So whether you consider yourself a leader, a manager, an owner, or someone of the ranks, when you go back to your office on Monday, or Tuesday, or today, Saturday, whenever it is you like to go to work, look for these short-term wins. And keep looking for these short-term wins until your employees reach the level of education and your company reaches the level of transformation in its business model that allows it to make these radical sustainability changes when the time comes. Because after all, you can't paper straw your way out of saving Florida's coastlines. Sustainability is really hard. There's no doubt about that. But if we keep asking ourselves, if we keep tackling these, what if we change just 1% questions, we can begin to make progress. And we can begin to make progress more rapidly than we ever thought possible. And as Georgia Tech alum and sustainability champion Ray Anderson, may he rest in peace, probably would have said, it's a great way to brighten your corner of the world too. Change 1% to change the world. Here at the Georgia Institute of Technology, we proudly say, you can do that. Thank you sincerely for your time and attention. May you be successful in your sustainability endeavors, and most importantly, may God go with you on that journey. Thank you very much. Thank you. Yes.
Let's give it up one more time for Will. What other companies can we get you on? Let's just send you to all of them.
So full disclosure, I have committed full-time to SunTrust, but I'm always open to new possibilities. So,
now it's interesting you say, because we always hear these examples of like, if you can just save one straw, but you're very much saying that's not the case. So when we do go back to our routines Monday, what's something that we can do, if that is influence a coworker or a friend, or maybe something more tangible that we could do?
Well, you know what? I'll just respond directly to your point. So even breaking that habit of using a plastic straw when you go to a restaurant, like that can make a significant impact down the line. And if you can convince your friends and your coworkers not to do that when you go on lunch break, you can begin to make progress, and you can begin to turn them on to the idea of being more sustainable. Because once you get started, you can look for other opportunities elsewhere and see how it all interconnects. That's where the big impact comes from.
That's great. Well, you're an incredible example of that, so thank you, Will. Really terrific job.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. We're going to keep TEDx Georgia Tech going. Your next speaker, incredibly accomplished. She's an award-winning filmmaker and documentarian. Variety magazine called her a documentarian to watch. Please give a warm welcome for Deborah Riley Draper.
Hello. Hi. I am a documentary filmmaker. I'm a filmmaker. What I love most about filmmaking is the opportunity to see things from a different lens. You have the ability to zoom in and look at things at a granular level and pull out so you can see the big picture, the big landscape. It's something we should all do from time to time. Change our perspective. Look at things just a little bit differently. I'm going to show you a short film that inspired me and changed my perspective. Interesting, right? This film was made in 1896. The filmmaker didn't have distribution. The filmmaker didn't have a studio deal. But the filmmaker had hustle. The filmmaker had given himself the green light. This filmmaker would write his own press releases, and he would invite the great newsmen of the time into the living rooms of his friends to talk about the films. He knew how to market. He knew how to PR. He knew how to hustle. Hustle was really important to him, and this is what he said about it. Everything comes to him who hustles while he waits. Thomas Edison was that filmmaker. He made 1,200 films. I was impressed by him, notwithstanding the content, but his distribution was so good that this content would create a cultural misrepresentation and stereotype that lives to this day. So his hustle was good. But what he did say inspired me. Everything comes to him who hustles while he waits. So at that moment, I was a wannabe filmmaker who wanted to be a filmmaker. And I knew what stood in between that was my hustle. So I decided to give myself the green light. That proverbial light bulb went off, and I said, I can do it. And here's what's interesting about that. You all have a light bulb that you get to control. You get to flip the switch on, and no one else can flip the switch off. So there I was. I had my green light. I was ready to go. I was going to be a filmmaker. The problem was I didn't have a script. I didn't have a camera. I didn't have a crew. I didn't have a budget. I actually didn't have anything other than my green light and my hustle. So I thought about this. I needed a process. I needed a formula. I needed an equation to help me get from point A to point B. So this is what I came up with, and this is what would power the engine of my hustle. Content plus intent equals impact. That's how I would get from being a wannabe filmmaker to a filmmaker. I would find the right content, something compelling, and I would intentionally take the right steps so that the world could see this. And the impact that I wanted would be content that would change people's perceptions about African Americans, content that would debunk stereotypes and myths, content that would bring the right stories about the right people to the table. So I needed to find that right content. But for me, finding that right content shouldn't be a problem. I worked in advertising. I knew good content when I saw good content. I knew I wanted it to be a gift back to the culture. I knew I wanted it to mean something. I knew it had to be important and it had to be substantial. And so, how would I find it? As luck would have it, the stars crossed, and I was listening to NPR one day, and Ford model Barbara Summers said, it happened November 28th, 1973. 5 American designers took on 5 French designers at the Chateau de Versailles, and it's the most epic moment in fashion, and Americans won. And their secret weapon, 12 black models. Whoa, light bulbs on again. I think I found my content. I think I found the story for my first film. And I did. 75 hours worth of footage later, interviews in New York and Paris, Versailles 73 was born.
I am still fascinated by what happened that night at the Palace of Versailles.
It's just not like any fashion show that had ever been before. It was a battle between the American and the French designers.
When the Americans presented, it was as if a new century had arrived.
That was a moment in history that changed the course of fashion. People stomped at Versailles because these girls were so fabulous. It was just like a fairy tale.
Great content, right? The type of content that I wanted to tell. So I had a film. What was I gonna do next? So I talked to some friends and I said, hey guys, I've got this great film. I know I wanted it to be distributed. I had great intent. I wanted the world to see this story. It had been buried for 40 years, so I wanted to bring it to light. So I said, I'm going to submit this film to the Cannes Film Festival. And they laughed. They're like, Deb, you know, that might be a stretch. You're a first-time filmmaker. You're not going to get into the Cannes Film Festival. It's not going to happen. Lower your standards. We know you have your green light on and everything, but you might want to take a step back into reality. So did I listen? Of course I didn't listen. I submitted my film to the Cannes Film Festival. Did I get in? Yes. No. I actually didn't get in. But that's okay, you know. A little heartbroken, but I didn't get in. But I had intent. And the beauty of intent is that these are precise, disciplined steps that you take to get where you want to go. Intentionality is never indiscriminate. Intentionality is about focus. It's about preparation. It's about knowing the steps you want to take. And at that moment, I knew that I needed exposure. So I have my green light. I'm feeling bold. This is a big move. I had given myself the green light. I called the Cannes Film Festival and spoke to the woman in the Marché du Film, and I said, hi, I submitted my film to the festival, and I didn't get in. And she said, oh, you want a market screening then? Yes. She said, what I have left is Palais J, K, L, and M. Do you know which one you'd prefer? J. It was my mother's, the initial in my mother's first name. Her name's Jeanette, so I picked J for that reason. She said, great, you're booked May 12th, 5:30 p.m. in Palais J, and we'll show your film. It's a market screening. Do you know the press and buyers and agents that you want to invite? Let me get back to you on that. So the point of this is when you give yourself the green light, you're going to propel yourself forward. Your hustle is going to drive you there, and that intent is going to get you right where you need it to be. So on May 12th at 5:30 p.m. in Palais J, my film was going to show. And at 5:28, I stood up to introduce the film, and I walk up to the front of the stage, not too different than this, and I look into the audience, and I see 6 people. And 3 of them had flown over from Atlanta with me. So, yeah. So this audience of 6 people, the lights are about to go down, the first frame is about to come up, then the doors burst open, a ton of people rush in. Because at that moment, you know, the green light that I had given myself was starting to look a little yellow. In fact, it was starting to flicker a whole lot. And I was like, this is going to be red any minute now. But it remained green, and after the film was over, I learned in that screening was Women's Wear Daily, the French bureau chief who would write a 4-page editorial about the film, the Hollywood Reporter, several festival programmers, agents, buyers, and a producer from Los Angeles who would eventually fall in love with this film enough to option it into a feature film. So intent is critically important. And what you do when you get to intent is you recognize that you can move forward with an independent film with no distribution, just like Thomas Edison. So while I didn't invite a bunch of newsmen into my living room, I did make sure that this film opened New York Fashion Week, Toronto Fashion Week, fashion weeks in Australia, Israel, and Croatia, and that it was seen in theaters. And no, we didn't have a theatrical deal. We had to four-wall it, which means that you had to distribute it yourself. So LA, Atlanta, New York, this film was distributed. And while the film was in the LA theaters, one of the programmers from Viacom saw the film and ultimately gave it its broadcast television debut. Content plus intent equals impact. That's how you measure your return on your hustle. And sometimes it may be personal, sometimes it may be professional, sometimes it may be cultural, and sometimes it may be small. Because everything you greenlight doesn't have to be a big theatrical film. It could be something that matters to you, something that you want to do that's personal, big or small. But it's your intent that's going to drive it. It's your hustle that's going to give you that impact. And for me, I had the bug. This green light was shining brighter than it ever could. And I wanted to make another film. And the content was there. It came to me just as a vision. There's a story about 18 African-American athletes who challenged Jim Crow and Hitler at the 1936 Olympics. And they won hearts and they won medals. But their stories were not in the history books. They had not been recognized at the White House as many other athletes had. So that was the content. The intent and the impact would practically write itself. I wanted to make sure that these athletes, their 18 names, went into the history books correctly, and their achievements and their feats were represented. I wanted to make sure that this film aired right in time for the 2016 Olympic Games, and I wanted the White House to apologize for not inviting them 80 years earlier and invite them to the White House. That was the intent. Also wrapped up in that was the impact. So 4 years of research, 4 years of hustle, 4 years of filmmaking, the film was born. And this time, we actually had a distribution deal going into the opening of this film. We opened at the LA Film Festival. Comcast gave us a day and date release, so we were in theaters. We screened in Rio right before the opening games. And above all else, there were tons of media, tons of PR. But the one thing that didn't happen was this White House situation. And it was nagging me because that was critically important. And then some folks at Procter & Gamble saw the film. They're Olympic sponsors, and they made this happen.
It wasn't just Jesse, it was other African-American athletes in the middle of Nazi Germany under the gaze of Adolf Hitler that put a lie to notions of racial superiority, whooped them, and taught them a thing or two about democracy and taught them a thing or two about the American character. So we're honored to have many of their families here today. We want to acknowledge them as well.
So these 18 athletes, after 80 years, were finally recognized in the White House by President Obama, and that was impact. This film, which was great content, powered by the engine of lots of intent, created an impact for 18 families, for Olympic history, for American history, for sports history. And that return on the hustle was personal, it was professional, it was also the right thing to do. And then more things happen, because once the impact starts to go, once your hustle is really kicking in, lots of great things do happen to those who hustle while they wait. The film was screened at the National African American History Center, supported by the Holocaust Museum. And we talked a little bit before about how Edison would call all the newspapers in to the friends of, to the living rooms of his friends and tell them about his projects, how he would publicize, how he would market. I didn't do that, but I did get this done.
Let's talk about the documentary. The 1936 Olympics, everyone knows the story of America beating the Germans. Yeah. A lot of people don't realize that at the same time, black athletes were at odds with America.
That's exactly right. Now, we often know about Jesse Owens, who is that one black athlete we know about who won 4 gold medals, of course, but there were 17 other black athletes that history has forgotten about. And this is a documentary that tells their story. It's their story. But you're right, they were kind of stuck in the middle because we were dealing with Jim Crow and racism here in America, but yet you represent your country in Nazi Germany, 1936. But now it's been an incredible journey. I narrated the film. I have to give props and love to Deborah Riley Draper, who wrote it and directed it and produced it. This is,
so that's
her
like
baby.
The best part, right?
She was like,
I'm just kidding. Just kidding. Just kidding. But that is the best part. But that's impact. That's the equivalent of calling all the great newspaper men into the living rooms of your friends. Instead, we were able to get Blair Underwood and Trevor Noah into the living room of America to talk about this film and to talk about this 80-year snub that we wanted everyone to know about. Great content plus disciplined steps that are intentional. Intent gets you impact. And when you put that all together, powered by your hustle, you get what I like to call the ROH, the return on your hustle. So if you learn nothing else from today's talk, remember that you can greenlight yourself, embody your hustle, and you'll have a great impact on it. Thank you.
Give it up one more time for Deborah Riley Draper. A few questions. So say in that moment when you were at the theater and your green light was going from yellow to starting to flicker red, what if that moment didn't happen where people flooded in? And what happened if you did screen your film for just your 6 people? What would have happened after that?
Well, here's the first thing that would have happened. I would have screened it for 600, 6,000. It doesn't matter. At that moment, I had a film I wanted to share. So those 6 people would have had the best screening and Q&A they could have ever imagined. But the hustle wouldn't have ended. You know, I would have figured out more disciplined steps to move forward the process of my filmmaking career and that film. You know, there are going to be obstacles. There are going to be things that are going to happen or not happen the way you want them to happen, but that's the whole point of the hustle. Everything comes to those who hustle while they wait. That's the point.
Persistence of the hustle.
Persistence of the hustle.
Awesome. Awesome. Give it up one more time. Deborah Riley Draper. Thank you. We're going to keep going with our speakers. Anna Dolce cannot be here today, but we're going to keep going. And right now we're going to share a video with you called Leaders Make Us Feel Safe by Simon Sinek. In a sec.
There's a man by the name of Captain William Swenson, who recently was awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor for his actions on September 8th, 2009. On that day, a column of American and Afghan troops were making their way through a part of Afghanistan to help protect a group of government officials, a group of Afghan government officials who'd be meeting with some local village elders. The column came under ambush and was surrounded on 3 sides. And amongst many other things, Captain Swenson was recognized for running into live fire to rescue the wounded and pull out the dead. One of the people he rescued was a sergeant, and he and a comrade were making their way to a medevac helicopter. And what was remarkable about this day is, by sheer coincidence, one of the medevac medics happened to have a GoPro camera on his helmet and captured the whole scene on camera. It shows Captain Swenson and his comrade bringing this wounded soldier who'd received a gunshot to the neck. They put him in the helicopter, and then you see Captain Swenson bend over and give him a kiss before he turns around to rescue more. I saw this, and I thought to myself, where do people like that come from? What is that? That is some deep, deep emotion when you would want to do that. There's a love there. And I want to know, why is it that I don't have people that I work with like that? You know, in the military, they give medals to people who are willing to sacrifice themselves so that others may gain. In business, we give bonuses to people who are willing to sacrifice others so that we may gain. Yeah, right? So I asked myself, where do people like this come from? And my initial conclusion was that they're just better people. That's why they're attracted to the military. These better people are attracted to this concept of service. But that's completely wrong. What I learned is that it's the environment. And if you get the environment right, every single one of us has the capacity to do these remarkable things, and more importantly, others have that capacity too. I've had the great honor of getting to meet some of these who we would call heroes, who've put themselves and put their lives at risk to save others. And I asked them, why would you do it? Why did you do it? And they all say the same thing, because they would have done it for me. It's this deep sense of trust and cooperation. So trust and cooperation are really important here. The problem with concepts of trust and cooperation is that they are feelings, they're not instructions. I can't simply say to you, trust me, and you will. I can't simply instruct two people to cooperate, and they will. It's not how it works. It's a feeling. So where does that feeling come from? If you go back 50,000 years to the Paleolithic era, to the early days of Homo sapien, what we find is that the world was filled with danger. All of these forces working very, very hard to kill us. Nothing personal. Whether it was the weather, lack of resources, maybe a saber-toothed tiger, all of these things working to reduce our lifespan. And so we evolved into social animals, where we lived together and worked together in what I call a circle of safety, inside the tribe, where we felt like we belonged. And when we felt safe amongst our own, the natural reaction was trust and cooperation. There are inherent benefits to this. It means I can fall asleep at night and trust that someone from within my tribe will watch for danger. If we don't trust each other, if I don't trust you, that means you won't watch for danger. Bad system of survival. The modern day is exactly the same thing. The world is filled with danger, things that are trying to frustrate our lives or reduce our success, reduce our opportunity for success. It could be the ups and downs of an economy, the uncertainty of the stock market. It could be a new technology that renders your business model obsolete overnight. Or it could be your competition that is sometimes trying to kill you. It's sometimes trying to put you out of business, but at the very minimum is working hard to frustrate your growth and steal your business from you. We have no control over these forces. These are a constant, and they're not going away. The only variable are the conditions inside the organization. And that's where leadership matters, because it's the leader that sets the tone. When a leader makes the choice to put the safety and lives of the people inside the organization first, to sacrifice their comforts and sacrifice the tangible results so that the people remain and feel safe and feel like they belong, remarkable things happen. I was flying on a trip, and I was witness to an incident where a passenger attempted to board before their number was called. And I watched the gate agent treat this man like he had broken the law, like a criminal. He was yelled at for attempting to board one group too soon. So I said something. I said, why do you have to treat us like cattle? Why can't you treat us like human beings? And this is exactly what she said to me. She said, sir, if I don't follow the rules, I could get in trouble or lose my job. All she was telling me is that she doesn't feel safe. All she was telling me is that she doesn't trust her leaders. The reason we like flying Southwest Airlines is not because they necessarily hire better people, it's because they don't fear their leaders. You see, if the conditions are wrong, we're forced to expend our own time and energy to protect ourselves from each other. And that inherently weakens the organization. When we feel safe inside the organization, we will naturally combine our talents and our strengths and work tirelessly to face the dangers outside and seize the opportunities. The closest analogy I can give to what a great leader is, it's like being a parent. If you think about what being a great parent is, what do you want? What makes a great parent? We want to give our child opportunities, education, discipline them when necessary, all so that they can grow up and achieve more than we could for ourselves. Great leaders want exactly the same thing. They want to provide their people opportunity, education, discipline when necessary, build their self-confidence, give them the opportunity to try and fail, all so that they could achieve more than we could ever imagine for ourselves. Charlie Kim, who's the CEO of a company called NextJump in New York City, a tech company, he makes the point that if you had hard times in your family, would you ever consider laying off one of your children? We would never do it. Then why do we consider laying off people inside our organization? Charlie implemented a policy of lifetime employment. If you get a job at NextJump, you cannot get fired for performance issues. In fact, if you have issues, they will coach you and they will give you support, just like we would with one of our children who happens to come home with a C from school. It's the complete opposite. This is the reason so many people have such a visceral hatred, sort of anger at some of these banking CEOs with their disproportionate salaries and bonus structures. It's not the numbers. It's that they have violated the very definition of leadership. They have violated this deep-seated social contract. We know that they allowed their people to be sacrificed so that they could protect their own interests. Or worse, they sacrificed their people to protect their own interests. This is what so offends us, not the numbers. Would anybody be offended if we gave a $150 million bonus to Gandhi? How about a $250 million bonus to Mother Teresa? Do we have an issue with that? None at all. None at all. Great leaders would never sacrifice the people to save the numbers. They would sooner sacrifice the numbers to save the people. Bob Chapman, who runs a large manufacturing company in the Midwest called Barry Waymiller, in 2008, he was hit very hard by the recession, and they lost 30% of their orders overnight. Now, in a large manufacturing company, this is a big deal, and they could no longer afford their labor pool. They needed to save $10 million. So, like so many companies today, the board got together and discussed layoffs. And Bob refused. You see, Bob doesn't believe in head counts. Bob believes in heart counts. And it's much more difficult to simply reduce the heart count. And so they came up with a furlough program. Every employee from secretary to CEO was required to take 4 weeks of unpaid vacation. They could take it any time they wanted, and they did not have to take it consecutively. But it was how Bob announced the program that mattered so much. He said, it's better that we should all suffer a little than any of us should have to suffer a lot. And morale went up. They saved $20 million. And most importantly, as would be expected, when the people feel safe and protected by the leadership in the organization, the natural reaction is to trust and cooperate. And quite spontaneously, nobody expected, people started trading with each other. Those who could afford it more would trade with those who could afford it less. People would take 5 weeks so that somebody else only had to take 3. Leadership is a choice. It is not a rank. I know many people at the senior-most levels of organizations who are absolutely not leaders. They are authorities, and we do what they say because they have authority over us, but we would not follow them. And I know many people who are at the bottoms of organizations who have no authority, and they are absolutely leaders. And this is because they have chosen to look after the person to the left of them, and they have chosen to look after the person to the right of them. This is what a leader is. I heard a story of some Marines who were out in theater, and as is the Marine custom, the officer ate last, and he let his men eat first. And when they were done, there was no food left for him. And when they went back out in the field, his men brought him some of their food so that he may eat. Because that's what happens. We call them leaders because they go first. We call them leaders because they take the risk before anybody else does. We call them leaders because they will choose to sacrifice so that their people may be safe and protected, and so their people may gain. And when we do, the natural response is that our people will sacrifice for us. They will give us their blood and sweat and tears to see that their leader's vision comes to life. And when we ask them, why would you do that? Why would you give your blood and sweat and tears for that person? They all say the same thing. Because they would have done it for me. And isn't that the organization we would all like to work in? Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Left their keys in the breakfast room? Okay. So Simon is not here. That was announcement. Someone has left their keys to a Ford, hopefully Fiesta. Where's Will? But it's in the breakfast table, so we'll get that. We're at your final speaker of the morning session. We have a lot more great stuff coming at TEDxGeorgiaTech, but very excited to bring up your next speaker. All of his research is based in his new book coming out this summer, so we all have to get it, called The Creativity Curve. Please get very loud for Alan Gannett.
Hello. Oh, that was so good. So we're going to have some fun. So my talk is engineering creativity, and I threw the word engineer in here because we're at Georgia Tech, so I thought you'd pay attention more, so it's good. But I have a book coming out that I've been working on for 3 years, all about how anyone can have moments of creative genius. For the book, I interviewed about 25 living creative geniuses and tons of academics who study creativity. And the thing I found is when you actually look at creativity, we think of it as something many of us is one of those things that you know it when you see it. It's, you look at that painting, you're like, oh, that's creative, versus when you look at one of my paintings, you go, not so much. But there's some people who are just so good at this. There's some people, the creative geniuses we think of, Pablo Picasso, Mozart, Beyonce, that are really, really good at this. We think about over here, we have Oprah, Elon Musk, Steve Jobs. They're able to create product after product, book after book, song after song that is incredibly successful, right? They are the true creative geniuses of our world. Of course, you also have to remember Taylor Swift. So, what's interesting about creativity is that it's very intertwined with creative genius. It's hard to talk about creativity without talking about the people who actually execute on it. One of the most famous creative geniuses is Paul McCartney. He has the number one singles of any songwriter ever, more than John Lennon. And he wrote the song Yesterday. Yesterday is the most recorded song in history. But what's interesting about the song Yesterday is how he came up with the idea. See, Paul McCartney one day just woke up with it. He literally talks about this in interviews. He says, I woke up one morning with a tune in my head and thought, hey, I don't know this tune, or do I? This creative genius literally woke up with the most recorded song in history. He was actually so worried about this that he had accidentally maybe plagiarized it, that he went around for weeks and would actually hum it to people and say, hey, have you heard this before? He was like, I'm suspicious. And this is also true. You can Google it. But he didn't have lyrics, so he used this placeholder lyrics. This is true. I'm going to sing it for you. Scrambled eggs. Oh, my baby, how I love your eggs. I believe in scrambled eggs. The crowd goes wild. This is true. So we have these stories of creative geniuses creating these amazing things, and it just seems so easy, right? They have these flashes, these moments that we, us normies, don't have. So this is what I call in the book the inspiration theory of creativity. And it's the main way that in Western culture we think of creativity. There's 4 main elements. The first is that it's individual-centric, right? It's Steve Jobs, it's Elon Musk, it's Beyonce. Second, it's easy, right? Paul McCartney literally wakes up with this. He's not struggling, right? We all know the story about J.K. Rowling was on a train and she had the idea for Harry Potter and she wrote it on a napkin. Third is it's overwhelming, right? It literally kind of ripples through them. Inspiration's like this sort of physical force. And fourth and finally, they're kind of weird. They're a little bit manic, they're maybe a little neurotic, they're maybe a little bit odd. And what's interesting about this is that it's also unattainable, right? This notion of creativity means if we weren't born with it, if we weren't born with the ability to just wake up with songs, then how are we going to actually learn to be more creative? A study done by Adobe found that only 25% of us think that we're living up to our creative potential. It's pretty depressing. I know, he's really cute. So the question I had, and one of the questions I tackle in the book is this actually true? Do you actually have to be born with this sort of amazing mystical genius to actually be creative? So what if this wasn't true? There's a lot of studies that dig into this, and what's amazing, and I'm going to talk a little bit about this, is the research shows this is actually wildly different than the truth. The truth is actually that creativity is a skill. It's a muscle. It's something you can get better at. Let me show you one of the studies. So for this study, we're going to go to Austria. And in Austria, there were some researchers at a university. And they had a pretty basic question. Do you have to be an IQ genius to be a creative genius? And so how they did this was they took a bunch of students, and they had them do an IQ test. Then they also had them do what's called a divergent thinking test. It's one of the academically valid ways to measure creative potential. And the whole idea was, okay, if you have to be a genius to be creative, there'd be a correlation. The higher the IQ, the more creative you would be. But here's what they found. There was a correlation, but only up until a point. See, IQ is on a standard bell curve. If you have an IQ of 100, half the world is smarter than you, half the world is less smart. What they found is that there was a correlation, but it stopped at an IQ of 104. If you have an IQ of 104 or higher, you have the same creative potential as everybody else. An IQ of 104, it's everybody in this room, right? This is well over 40% of the world. This is billions and billions of people with the same creative potential. It's not just a handful of creative geniuses that we can all name and think of. So this is called the threshold theory. It's the idea that above a certain relatively average IQ, we all have the same creative potential. Yes, all of us. So if we all have this potential, well then the obvious question is, how do we unlock it? How do we actually get this potential to the surface? And so to tell you this story, I'm going to go to lovely Phoenix, Arizona, the Phoenix suburbs actually. You might retire there one day. And I'm going to tell you about a little video rental store. Now, if you're like me, you probably don't remember video rental stores, like a hazy memory. But here's what they look like. And those are VHS tapes. They sell Raisinets. You might be familiar with those. I know. This is like Netflix, but like in a store. And at this video rental store in the suburbs of Phoenix was an 18-year-old community college student named Ted. He was the clerk. And this is not Ted. Ted didn't have a beard. And what was weird about this is that every day around 6 o'clock, something would happen. A line would form of people waiting to talk to this 18-year-old clerk. They would wrap around the comedy section, the horror section, all the way past the weird international films, all wanting to talk to Ted. Because for some reason, Ted had this amazing ability to tell you what movies you would like. If you said, I like Woody Allen, he said, how about Albert Brooks? If you like this action movie, how about that action movie? He was like a film sommelier. He knew all the different movies. And the reason why is kind of interesting. So Ted grew up in a sort of chaotic household. His parents had him when they were teenagers. He had 4 siblings. They were poor. And so to escape, he would go over to his grandmother's house. And this is what you get when you buy stock photos for grandmother's living room. This looks kind of 1960s, but it was the 1980s, so play along. And his grandmother loved entertainment. She loved Hollywood. She would constantly be playing TV. She had all the Hollywood gossip magazines strewn across the living room. She would talk about the actors and actresses with their first names as if they were former lovers and friends. And Ted found that this was an escape. This was somewhere where he could get away. He could really be safe. And so one day, when this physical Netflix opened down the street, he walked in and he started looking and playing, moving around the movies. And the owner was like, wow, this kid's really into this. Why don't you work here? And he was like, yeah, that'd be great. But here's the thing. Video rental stores, I know I have to explain this. I'll be slow. They're empty during the day because people are at work. They don't really rent movies, right? You're not watching Netflix at work, okay? And so Ted was like, well, I could do my homework, or I could watch every single video in the store. And I'm not being hyperbolic. It was the 1980s. There wasn't as many videos. But he literally watched every single video in the store. And what happened was that Ted had consumed a huge amount of content. He understood what movies were out there, what people have seen, what was similar, what was different. And from this, he developed taste. This taste went on to serve him incredibly well. He's now the chief content officer of Netflix, which this year is producing 700 pieces of original programming. Over the last 18 years, has completely upended Hollywood since he started. He's in charge of all content licensing, content acquisition, all of this. And he describes that time at that video rental store as a film school and MBA all wrapped up into one. It gave him the underlying ingredients for his creativity. But why? This is actually a pattern that you see over and over again when you look at the stories of creative genius. They constantly are consuming. J.K. Rowling was asked in an interview, how do you become a great writer? And what she said, that the most important thing is to read as much as you can, like I did. It will give you an understanding of what makes good writing, and it will enlarge your vocabulary. So why does this work? When I interviewed these creative geniuses for my book, over and over again, they told me they had some period of intense consumption. You know, if they were maybe a novelist, they went to the library and read lots and lots of books. If they were a musician, they would sit in their room just listening to all these songs. But why was this tied to creativity? And so to talk about this, we're going to fast forward to me in 20 years. I aged really well. And for some reason, I'm reading a paper newspaper. It's weird. It's nostalgic. And I'm paging through this oddly paper newspaper, and I come across a crossword puzzle. And what's interesting about crossword puzzles for the science of creativity is how we solve them. See, there's two different ways you can solve a crossword puzzle. The first is what we call logical processing. This is when you're looking at the crossword puzzle, and you're like, OK, there's like an R here, an R there, maybe an E. Oh, it's green. I got it, right? That's a very slow, deliberate, conscious way to process. And this happens in the left hemisphere of our brain. See, it's very kind of cliche to talk about right hemisphere, left hemisphere, but it's actually really important to the science of how creativity works. See, in the left hemisphere of our brain, we store the dominant meanings of words. So, for example, if I said, what is the color of the sky? You'd say blue or gray. And when you're solving a math problem, the left hemisphere of your brain is working through it and very consciously solving this step by step by step. It's a very aware process. Now, there's another way you can solve a crossword puzzle. You've all had this experience. Sometimes you're looking at it, and you're just looking, and you're like, oh, it's green. You have sudden insight. And what's interesting about this for scientists who study creativity is that these types of sudden insights, these are the same things from a biological perspective as those flashes of genius. So they give us a way to actually study how our brain works when creativity is happening. And here's what we found. So these flashes of genius, one of the people who studies them a lot is this guy named Dr. Edward Bowden. He's a professor who works a lot with the Creative Brain Lab at Northwestern University. I interviewed him a lot for my book. And one of the things he said that I think is a really good sort of punchline to this is that aha moments are a normal cognitive process, but they have a surprising result. See, what happens is that our right brain is in charge of having more nuanced, more metaphorical associations. So for example, if you're watching a stand-up comedian and assuming they're funny, they say a joke, your right brain instantly connects the pun. It gets why it's funny. It's not thinking through the joke very logically and trying to understand it. You know, another way you can think about this is think about a word like worm. If I said visualize a worm, you might visualize something like this without the weird face. But your right hemisphere would do something different. Your right hemisphere would be like, what about gummy worms? Or those songs that you can't stop thinking about, you know, earworms. So our right hemisphere has this amazing ability to connect distant concepts. But the thing is that it's actually not special. It's simply subconscious. Our right hemisphere is doing this processing all the time, trying to connect new and different and disparate ideas, but it does this all below the level of consciousness. And it only comes out and says, hey, when he actually has the idea. And it feels somewhat magical, but it's simply biology. And the thing is that you can actually learn how to make these happen. And the reason how you do this is it's all about consumption. So Dr. Edward Bowden told me this in our interview, and I put it in the book twice, the second time in bold. It was really obnoxious. because I think it's really important, this quote. He said, "You can't have insights about things you don't know anything about." Paul McCartney grew up in a household where his parents were musicians. He was listening to music throughout his entire childhood. He played in a cover band for years. So yeah, of course he dreams about music and you don't. J.K. Rowling also had a troubled childhood. She would lock herself in her bedroom and just read books to escape. So yeah, of course she dreams about characters and you don't. But that doesn't mean you can't. So for the book, I interviewed all these different creatives. It was ranging from billionaires like David Rubenstein, YouTubers like Casey Neistat, Nina Jacobson, who was the president of Walt Disney Motion Pictures. And over again, I found that they spend a huge amount of time not creating content, but consuming content. Because consuming content is what gives you the ingredients to actually connect and have the ideas to bring together. And one of the most interesting things was not just they had some period in their childhood where they spent all day locked up reading or watching or doing, but it actually continues to this day. So even people like Ted Sarandos, even though they're running big organizations, even though they have all this success, Ted Sarandos told me that he still watches 3 to 4 hours of television every single day. Because consuming content is how you form creativity. And so I call this in the book, I call it the 20% principle. And it's the idea that even to this day, these people we aspire to be, they spend 20% of their waking hours simply consuming content in their niche to give them the raw materials to be creative. And so the thing I want to leave you with today is that consumption, the thing we may all feel a little bit guilty about, is actually what leads to being able to create. Thank you very much. Thanks, appreciate it.
So it sounds like, in a way, you're kind of justifying our binge watching.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay,
yeah,
cool. But you're also saying there's hope for us. So maybe if we don't deem ourselves creative, we are.
Yeah, and I think part of the problem is that a lot of us actually use this inspiration theory of creativity as an excuse. Like we say, well, it's not easy for us, so I'm just not going to try, which I actually think is the wrong thing to take away. It's that, no, for these people, if you read the autobiography of a lot of creative greats, like if you read Ben Franklin's autobiography, he talks about how much of a struggle it was for him to become a great writer. And so I think the lesson from these stories is not, oh, it's not easy for me, so I won't try. It's, oh, it's actually really hard for them, so I better work pretty hard. Cool. Very cool. Thank you.
One more time for Alan Gannett. Thank you so much for being with us. This is just the morning half. We're going to have lunch and new swag in the afternoon, I've been told, and cookies and really tremendous speakers. So hang out, make sure to be here for the full day. Get to know new people at lunch, and we will see you for the second half soon. Oh, thanks.